Right, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning, everyone. Selamat pagi, as we say here in Malaysia. Welcome to Go ESG ASEAN 2021. And this event is a call to action for companies to raise business SDG ambitions and mainstream sustainable financing. Now, it is a 2 day summit, and it will provide deeper insights and showcase best practice actions from ASEAN and global leaders on raising SDG ambition, pathways of achieving them, and opportunities in closing the financing gap. Now, Go ESG ASEAN is part of SDG Ambition Month 2021, which is call to action for companies to engage in sustainable actions for business resilience. So once again, thank you to everyone for joining us. Hopefully, you're having a great start to your day, having your breakfast at the moment, perhaps having your favorite coffee or latte, whatever it is. Well, we hope you'll stay here until the end of today's program. It is a 2 day summit, remember. And we'd like to thank all our esteemed and distinguished speakers who will share their thoughts, experiences, knowledge through the panel discussions and fire starter talk. And I believe you can join in the discussion later by sharing your questions or thoughts through the chat box. And I believe the moderator of each session will pick up some of the questions and perhaps try to address as many as possible, depending on the time, of course. Right, before I introduce our first speaker of the day, who will deliver her opening remarks, a very big thank you to our partners. They are Sarawak Energy Berhad, Bursa Malaysia Berhad, Tenaga Nasional Berhad or TNB, Tata Consultancy Services, Insha Holdings Berhad, Credo, Capital Markets Malaysia. Thank you. Let's give them a big round of applause wherever you are. Just give them a big round of applause. I can hear applause coming through on our virtual platform. Thank you so much. Thank you to our partners for coming together to ensure the success of today's event, Go ESG ASEAN 2021. And of course, the success of this event will definitely contribute to the success of SDG Ambition Month 2021. Right, if you are ready to start today's discussion and seminar and forums and panel discussions and fire starter talk, everything we've got lining up for you today, I would like to invite our first speaker of the day who will deliver the opening remarks. She is the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Malaysia, Brunei Darussalam, and Singapore. Please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Miss Karima El Korri. Over to you, Miss Karima.
Thank you. Mr. Feroz Nadar, Executive Director, Global Compact Malaysia and Brunei, distinguished keynote speakers and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Allow me to begin by thanking the UN Global Compact for this opportunity to address business leaders and their partners on the critical contribution of the private sector to environmental, social, and governance outcomes, but specifically in delivering the SDGs. While I am aware that the companies in Malaysia and Brunei have long been familiar with ESG responsibilities, I want to advocate for a renewed focus on the global goals as a collective imperative requiring collective actions. When the SDGs were framed and adopted in 2015, they were underpinned by principles that differentiated them from past development frameworks. One of the most important is jointness of action by government, the private sector, civil society, and the people. Indeed, the level of ambition embedded in the goals means that it's only by working together that we can ensure their full achievement. Rapid technological and social change has made this even more relevant today than it was then. I want to quickly reference the two priorities of our time: securing a lasting and inclusive recovery from the pandemic, and re-engaging with the fight against climate change. I then come back to the role of business as a key partner. The COVID-19 pandemic has been an unprecedented crisis for humankind, foremost in health, with some 258 million infections and over 5.1 million deaths globally, but also millions of lost jobs and wrecked livelihoods, schools and colleges shuttered, and in turn, unprecedented levels of social dislocation. We have considerable reversals in development progress, and the pandemic has put long-term progress towards the SDGs at grave risk. Within ASEAN, the most significant impacts have included sharply rising poverty and deprivations, a host of worsening inequities, rising gender inequality, infringements to workers' rights and working conditions, particularly for those in the informal work, and with that, deteriorations in the social contract between states and people, growing corruption, and falling trust in institutions. Moreover, even within the environmental domain, the one area that initially benefited from economic and social shutdowns, we have seen a rapid resurgence of the climate emergency as the global economy began to reopen. However, it is important to recall that the SDG performance challenges we have both globally and at country level are not a product of COVID-19 alone. Indeed, the world was already off track back in 2019 when the UN Secretary General launched the Decade of Action to restore SDG progress. The pandemic has amplified the fragility of our systems and exposed deep-seated vulnerabilities. As a result, the financing and delivery gaps have grown wider, with some estimates suggesting that over $1 trillion is needed just to restore progress. The scale of this task has again made clear that the governments alone cannot and will not put countries back on track. Harnessing the private sector's energy, ingenuity, and innovation is vital, and enterprises of all sizes have a pivotal role to play. Second, looking to the longer term and the increasingly pressing challenge posed by climate change, we must take stock and respond to the outcomes of COP26. While there were undoubtedly many disappointments, there are also some reasons to be positive. Malaysia and Brunei have committed to high ambitions, including net zero emissions by 2050 and restricting average global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Regardless of the choice of words in the outcome document, coal-based energy and in time, other carbon-intensive sources will become technologies of the past. These types of assets are now effectively impaired, and the clear trajectory is with investing in greener energy. And with specific regards to the power of business, we absolutely welcome that a coalition of 450 of the world's biggest investors and fund managers, controlling $130 trillion in assets, is committing to deploy their collective capital to hit net zero emissions targets by 2050. It is hugely encouraging that businesses across the globe, including those in ASEAN, are stepping up to the twin challenges of COVID-19 and of climate change. The Global Compact and its 10 principles and events like this one today offer much needed mechanisms for partnership building. The role of government is to facilitate and enable the required whole of society approach. This involves providing the right signals and policy directions, delivering where needed, pump priming resources alongside tax and regulatory incentives, and by tracking progress and correcting course. It is encouraging to note that here in Malaysia, government is genuinely trying to address some of the disconnects. This includes mobilizing businesses to support an inclusive COVID recovery, setting a firm direction on emissions, and by laying some of the longer-term foundations to deliver SDG-compliant financing. Before I conclude, I want to underline 3 key takeaway messages that might guide your deliberations today and tomorrow. First, it is vital that we build a genuine partnership beyond the rhetoric between governments, civil society, and business interests. This requires all actors to respect and understand each other's roles and needs in delivering a coalition that can accelerate SDG progress. This requires open and transparent dialogue and commitment based on the recognition that win-win outcomes are the norm rather than the exception. Again, the UN Global Compact can play a vital role. The function of other business organizations and local chambers of commerce is also important, particularly at different geographic levels. It is crucial that basic mechanisms of consultation, information, dissemination, and leadership are established. To this end, the UN in Malaysia and Brunei, Darussalam, and Singapore is keen to support Together for SDGs, a platform hub to be launched next year here in Malaysia to foster partnerships and showcase private sector SDG-related commitments and solutions. Second, I cannot emphasize enough that meeting ESG aims, including contributing to the SDGs, is good for business and unambiguously good for the bottom line. The gains extend well beyond good corporate citizenship and meeting CSR and regulatory requirements. There are myriad opportunities through which companies can maximize value added and shareholder returns in marketing and building consumer confidence, in achieving more effective regulatory compliance, in attracting talent, boosting productivity of all workers, in empowering women, and in sourcing cheaper and more reliable sources of finance. It is possible and even advantageous to do well financially, specifically by adhering to the ethical business practices. These gains are especially pertinent to the national context, given the young demographics, the huge untapped potentials of the workforce, and the availability of new technologies and willingness to innovate. Third, I highlight the value of the SDG framework as a compass for action and performance tracking of business activities. I began by highlighting the collective aim and tasks we face in delivering the goals, but it's also important to recognize that the SDGs offer a practical platform based on a common set of benchmarks and policy steers. The UN has long promoted the value of the SDGs for government statistical policymaking and managerial functions, and yet the same is also true for businesses, as the framework provides a ready-made metric for ESG analysis and reporting on the so-called triple bottom line. Through effective partnerships between the UN and national statistical offices, SDG targets and indicator data are already being enhanced across the ASEAN region and globally, to speak more generally, including in Malaysia and Brunei, of course. These have important business applications for performance reporting, for audit, for impact investment appraisal. And the UN is keen to engage further with the Global Compact in empowering the private sector to harness these analytical resources. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I conclude by underlining that the Global Compact does sterling work in placing business partners at the heart of efforts to deliver the SDGs. And we are keen to see more companies participating and adopting the 10 principles. The Compact's local networks have built a strong basis for the public-private dialogue and the joined-up actions that will be required to deliver on the 2030 agenda. And what is hopefully the close of COVID-19 pandemic, hopefully, and the marking of new global commitments to addressing climate change, it is abundantly clear that all stakeholders have a role to play in delivering the sustainable and inclusive future that we all want. Let us now work together to enable businesses to become active and true partners in transforming our world. Thank you very much.